Some stories feel wrong before you even understand why. Welcome back. We break down real accounts from 4chan, shared by people who lived through the kind of moments that stay with you. This one starts with something easy to dismiss, and that's exactly what makes it unsettling. Sit back, dim the room, and subscribe so you don't miss the next upload. Let's get into it. The station in Ellisville sits on a spur that used to matter and mostly doesn't anymore. 2 trains a night, sometimes 1. And in December of 2020, with everything else going on, sometimes 0. I was the only one on the platform that shift, same as usual. The 1147 southbound was running late. It was cold in a way Mississippi gets cold about once every 4 or 5 winters. Wet cold. My breath was coming out white, and the metal railing on the ramp had that dull frost on it that isn't quite ice yet. I was drinking bad coffee from the machine inside the office, the kind that tastes like the paper cup no matter what you put in it. And I had the little space heater going by my boots because the office window doesn't seal right, and hasn't for years. The train showed up at 12:04. Freight cars first, then 2 passenger coaches on the back because that line still runs a stub service between Hattiesburg and Laurel, though I'll bet money it won't for much longer. Only 2 people ever get off at Ellisville, and usually it's nobody. That night, the doors opened, and one person stepped down. She was maybe 50, long coat, dark, no suitcase, no purse that I could see. Her hair was tied back, and it was gray at the front, brown further back. And I remember thinking she looked like somebody's aunt, the kind you'd see at a church potluck. She stood on the platform and didn't move, just looked at the station building. I walked over and did the thing you do. "Evening, ma'am. Welcome to Ellisville." She nodded, but she didn't look at me. She was looking at the front of the building, up above the door where the old painted sign used to be. That sign came down years ago. You can still see the outline of the letters if the light hits it right. Ray was leaning out of the coach door. He's been a conductor on that route since I started. Big guy, red beard going white. He gave me the manifest sheet like always. I looked at it. No passengers listed for Ellisville. That happens. People buy same day, or they don't scan properly on a rural stop. I said, "Ray, she came off the second coach?" He looked past me at the woman. He looked at her for a second longer than felt right. Then he said, "Man, nobody came off my train." I laughed a little because I thought he was messing with me. Ray does that. He'll say the strangest things with a straight face and wait for you to react. But he wasn't smiling. He looked at me like he was waiting for me to explain the joke. "Ray, she's right there." He leaned further out. He looked at her again. He shook his head slow. "I didn't stop for a passenger. I stopped because you're on the schedule. I opened the doors because that's the protocol. Nobody got off." I took the manifest back to the office. I keep the ticket log open on the computer during shifts. Everything's online now anyway. I pulled up the sales for the Ellisville stop. Nothing for that day. Nothing for the week. Nothing for October or November either. I scrolled back further than I meant to. The last ticket sold for an Ellisville arrival was in June. When I came back out, she was still there. She'd moved maybe 3 feet. She was standing in front of the window that looks into what used to be the waiting room. That room's been locked up since I started. They use it for storage now. Boxes of old timetables and a couple of broken benches. I said, "Ma'am, can I help you with something? Do you need to call somebody?" She turned her head and looked at me for the first time. Her eyes were fine. That's the thing I want to say up front. There was nothing wrong with her eyes. She wasn't glazed over. She wasn't crying. She didn't have that look people get when they're on something. She looked like a woman who'd just come in on a train and was trying to remember where she was. "I thought there was still a cafe here," she said. Her voice was normal too. Soft, southern, a little tired. I said, "No, ma'am, there hasn't been a cafe here in a long time. There's a gas station up the road that stays open. They've got sandwiches." She smiled at me a little. It wasn't a big smile. She said, "That's all right, thank you." Then she turned and walked down the ramp on the far side of the platform, the one that leads toward the road into town. She didn't hurry. She wasn't unsteady. She walked like she knew where she was going. I watched her until she got past the parking lot lights. There's a stretch after that where the road doesn't have any street lamps for about a quarter mile because the town never got around to replacing them. She walked into that stretch and I lost her in it. Ray was still standing in the open door of the coach. He hadn't moved either. I walked back over. He said, "Who were you talking to?" I said, "Ray, come on." He said, "I'm asking." I told him a woman got off. Gray hair, dark coat, no bag. I told him she asked about the cafe. He listened to all of it, and then he climbed down onto the platform, which he never does, and he walked to the spot where she'd been standing. He looked at the concrete. He looked back up at the building. He said, "There's cameras in the coaches now. You know that." I knew that. They put them in maybe 3 years ago. He said, "When I get to Laurel, I'll have them pulled. I'll send you the file." I said, "All right." He got back on. The train sat there another minute or so, longer than it should have, and then it moved off south. I stood on the platform after it was gone. It got quiet in the way it gets quiet out there, which is not really quiet. There's always some sound. Tree frogs even in December sometimes, or a dog somewhere. That night I could hear a truck on the highway a mile away. I could hear my own boots on the concrete when I shifted my weight. I walked to the far end of the platform and looked down the road she'd taken. The lights of the gas station were on up past the bend. Nothing was moving. I did what I was supposed to do. I went inside and I wrote it up. Incident report, timestamp, description of the individual, sequence of events. I noted that the conductor did not observe the passenger disembark. I noted that no ticket had been sold for that arrival. I signed it, and I left the second signature line for Ray to sign next time he came through, which he did 3 nights later, and he read the whole thing before he signed it. He didn't say anything while he was reading. When he was done, he put the pen down and he said, "You put it exactly how it happened." I said, "Yeah." He said, "All right then." The camera file came a week after that. Ray drove it over on a thumb drive because he didn't want to email it. I watched it in the office with him standing behind me. It was the interior of the second coach for the whole run from Hattiesburg down through Ellisville and on to Laurel. There were 4 passengers on that run. A man in a work jacket sleeping against the window. A younger couple sharing earbuds. Nobody else. Nobody stood up at Ellisville. Nobody walked to the doors. The doors opened at the stop. You could see the platform light come in through them, and they closed again, and the train moved on. Ray watched the whole thing with me and didn't say anything until it was done. Then he said, "I'm going to head home." I went and looked up the cafe thing later, on my own time. I'm not much of a researcher, but there's a woman at the Historical Society in Laurel who answers questions if you're polite. She told me the cafe that used to be attached to the Ellisville station closed in 1994. The building it was in got knocked down in 1996 to make room for the parking extension. She sent me a picture. It was a little wood frame place with a hand-painted sign, and the sign had the same font as the one that used to be above the station door. I've been working this station for 12 years. I've had drunks on the platform. I had a kid one summer I had to walk home because his mama was passed out at the pickup spot. None of that ever bothered me the way this bothered me. I don't tell this story much. I've told my brother, and I've told the guy I fish with on weekends who's known me since high school, and I told my wife once, and she asked me not to tell it to her again. Not because she didn't believe me, but because she did. I only tell it the one time to any person. The second time is harder. The first telling uses up something in you, and by then you already know how the other person is going to look at you. So I say it once, and when it comes up again I just say, "Yeah, that happened." And I change the subject. The 1147 still runs some nights. I still work the platform. When the doors open, I still step forward like I'm supposed to. Most nights, nobody gets off. That's most nights. I fish alone. Always have. My wife used to say it was the one thing I didn't ruin by bringing other people into it, and she meant that as a compliment, I think. So when I say I was out on the river by myself that August, understand that this was normal for me, not something a smart person would call a warning sign. This was 2020. Everything was closed, everything was strange, and I'd been laid off from a plant outside Vicksburg 3 months prior. Fishing was cheap. Fishing was quiet. It didn't require me to stand 6 feet from anyone or listen to anyone's opinion about the news. The spot was on a slough off the Yazoo. up past Redwood, where the river narrows and the trees close in over the water so tight that in daylight it looks like a green tunnel. At night, it just looks like nothing. Black water, black trees, a slice of sky if you crane your neck. I had a little John boat pulled up on a mud bank, and my folding chair set up on the bank itself, because I like feeling solid ground under me when I'm out that late. I had catfish rods set, 2 of them, on forked sticks, bells on the tips, a cooler with beer and a sandwich. A citronella bucket that wasn't doing much of anything against the mosquitoes. My phone was in a Ziploc in my pocket because I dropped a phone in that same river back in 2017 and never got over it. It was hot. That specific Mississippi August hot, where the air doesn't move and your shirt sticks to the chair. Frogs going, cicadas going, every so often something big rolling in the shallows further down. Gar, probably. I wasn't nervous. I was bored mostly, and half drunk in that slow way where you're pacing yourself because you know you have to drive home. Around 1 in the morning, the frogs stopped. Not all at once, but close enough. The chorus thinned out and then just wasn't there anymore. I noticed because it got easier to hear the water. And the water on that stretch doesn't make much sound. It's flat and slow. When the frogs quit, all I had was the hum of my own ears and the little tick of the bell on the far rod moving in the current. I checked over my shoulder first. That's the reflex out there. Because if anything's coming for you at night, it's coming from the woods, not from the river. Nothing. Just the trees, the mud path back to where I'd parked, my truck, a black shape at the top of the rise. I turned back to the water and reached for my beer, and then I saw it. It was already close, coming down the current from upstream, maybe 40 yards out, dead center of the channel. At first, I thought it was a fallen tree. That's what a lot of stuff on that river looks like at night. A log that's been rolling and gathering brush for miles. But it was too flat, too square, and there was something on top of it. I sat very still, and I let my eyes work. It was a raft, homemade, barrels underneath, I couldn't tell what kind, and a platform of what looked like scrap plywood and pallet wood lashed together on top. No motor, no lantern, no running lights of any kind, which is illegal on any waterway I've ever fished. But I wasn't thinking about legality yet. I was thinking about the shapes on the platform. There were people on it. I want to be careful here about how I describe this, because in my head at the time, it was a lot worse than what it actually was, and I don't want to make it sound like something it wasn't. There were bodies sitting on that raft. 5, maybe 6. I couldn't get a clean count in the dark. Some sitting up with their arms around their knees, one lying down, curled. They weren't tied. They weren't slumped like they were dead. They were just sitting, the way you sit on a long bus ride when you've given up on being comfortable. None of them made a sound. I've been on that river at night for 20 years. I have heard duck hunters miles away arguing about a dog. I have heard a couple in a canoe whispering, and I could pick out every word. Sound travels on flat water like it's on a wire. 6 people on a raft going past me at conversational distance should have been the loudest thing on the river. There was nothing. No cough. No shifting, not the sound of a hand on plywood. Whatever discipline they were holding it hard. The raft kept coming. It was going to pass me maybe 20 feet out. I didn't stand up. I don't know why. Something in me knew that standing up was the wrong thing to do. That whatever was happening on that raft, I was not supposed to be part of it. I sat in my folding chair with a warm can of beer in my hand, and I watched them come. When they were level with me, one of them turned his head. Just his head. His body didn't move. He was sitting near the front, closer to my side of the raft, and he turned and looked at me. I could see the shape of his face, but not the features. No expression I could read. He didn't wave. He didn't put a finger to his lips. He didn't do anything that a person in a movie would do. He just looked at me for as long as it took the raft to slide past, and then he turned his head back the way it had been. That was the worst part. The turning back, because it meant he had decided something about me and moved on. The raft kept going. It slid past my rods, past the mud bank, past the bend where the slough opens back into the main channel, and then the trees ate it. I sat there with my hands still around the beer can, and I realized I hadn't taken a breath in probably 30 seconds. Here's the thing I want to be honest about. My first thought was not that those people needed help. My first thought was that I had seen something I wasn't supposed to see, and that the smart move was to reel in, load the boat, and pretend I had gone home an hour earlier. I actually started doing it. I stood up, and I walked over to the near rod, and I put my hand on the reel. And then I thought about the one on the platform who was curled up. And I thought about how none of them were paddling. A raft with no motor moving at the speed of the current is not a raft anybody chose. It's a raft you end up on. I got my phone out of the Ziploc. I did not have service where I was standing. I walked up the mud path to the truck, still not sure what I was going to say, and I got one bar at the top of the rise. I called the Coast Guard's number for the lower Mississippi. I had it saved from years ago because a buddy of mine ran commercial and made me put it in. The woman who picked up was calm in that way dispatchers are calm. I told her what I'd seen. I told her the time and the stretch of water and the direction. I told her about the raft and the barrels and the count of people. I told her the one had looked at me. She asked if I was in danger. I said no. She asked if the people on the raft had appeared to be in distress. I said I honestly did not know. She said units would go and told me to stay near my phone. I sat in the truck with the door open and the dome light off. I didn't fish. I didn't drink the rest of the beer. I listened to the river, which had started making its regular sounds again, frogs and all, like whatever had passed through had taken a hush with it. They called me back around 3:15. They'd found the raft about 4 miles downstream, in a cut where it had drifted against a snag. 6 people on board, 3 men, 2 women, one who was closer to a kid than an adult. They didn't say more than that. No papers, no English past a few words. They had been on the water, according to what they could piece together, for the better part of 5 days, moving only at night, hiding the raft under brush during the day. They were dehydrated. One of them was in bad shape. The word the officer used was transit. He said this was not the first raft they'd pulled off that river that summer. Motorboats get noticed. A raft with the lights off doesn't. It's slower and it's worse, but it's cheaper. And it doesn't ping anybody's radar until somebody like me happens to be sitting on a bank at 1 in the morning, with nothing better to do than look at the water. He asked me a few more questions about where and when. He thanked me. He said the people were being handed off to immigration, and that whoever had put them on that raft and pointed them downstream was probably not going to be found, which was said in a tone that meant he had said it many times before. I gave a short statement a few days later over the phone. That was the end of my involvement. I didn't fish for about 3 weeks. Not out of fear exactly. I would sit down to tie a rig and my hands would work fine, and then I would just get up and do something else. My wife noticed. She didn't push. When I did go back, I went to the same slough on purpose. I wanted to know if it was still my place or if it had become something else. I set up the same chair in the same spot, and I ran the same 2 rods. I caught a small blue cat around 11 and threw him back. The frogs stayed loud all night. Nothing came down the current except a mat of hyacinth and 1 plastic bottle. I've been back plenty of times since. No more rafts. What sticks with me isn't the raft. It's the way that man turned his head, looked, and turned it back. He decided I was not the danger and not the help, just a shape on the bank. He had bigger problems than me. The pitch was 3 young men gone in 18 months, all from one county in southern West Virginia, and no local paper willing to touch it past the initial write-up. My editor at the time, Rachel, thought there was a piece in it. Maybe opioids, maybe labor trafficking, maybe just the boring answer of a county that had already been hollowed out and didn't want to admit its kids were leaving on their own. She gave me a week and a mileage cap and told me not to embarrass her. I drove down on a Sunday in August. 94 degrees, sky the color of dishwater. The county seat had 1 working stoplight and a Family Dollar with a hand-painted plywood sign in the window that said, "We hire." Coming in from the north, you cross a bridge over a creek that runs orange from something upstream, and the smell hits you before the water does. The motel was a place called the Ridgeview, 12 rooms in an L around a parking lot, office at the corner, ice machine that didn't work. I paid cash for 4 nights. The woman at the desk looked at my out-of-state plates through the window and asked what brought me down. I said I was doing a piece on the economy. She nodded like she'd heard that one before and slid a key across. Room 7, bed, chair, TV bolted to the dresser, carpet the color of wet cardboard. I set up my laptop and made calls. 2 families had already told me by phone they'd talk. By the time I'd been in the room an hour, both had backed out. One father said his wife wasn't feeling well. The other just said he'd changed his mind and hung up before I could ask anything else. Neither would pick up when I tried again. I walked into town for dinner. There was a diner 2 blocks off the square. Vinyl booths, the kind of place where every head turns when the bell over the door goes. Nobody was rude. That was the thing. 2 guys at the counter nodded at me. The waitress called me Hun. When I asked about the missing men, and I said it plain, I named them, she topped off my coffee and said, "You'd want to talk to the sheriff about that, Hun," and moved to the next booth. Everyone I tried that first evening did some version of the same thing. Polite deflection. A guy outside the hardware store said, "Wasn't from around here anyway," one of them. Which wasn't true. All 3 were locals. I wrote it down in my notebook and didn't correct him. I got back to the motel a little before 10. The parking lot had 5 cars when I left, mine included. When I came back, there were 9. I remember because I stopped at the edge of the lot and counted them. 2 pickups, a sedan, a work van with a ladder rack, and a maroon SUV I didn't recognize. Some of the rooms had lights on now. Fine, people check in late. I fell asleep with the AC unit rattling. Around 3 in the morning, I woke up because a car door closed outside. Not slammed, closed. I got up to piss and looked through the gap in the curtain out of habit. The lot had shifted. The maroon SUV was gone. So was one of the pickups. In their place were a different sedan and a hatchback with a bumper sticker I couldn't read from that distance. No headlights on. No people I could see. Nobody in the office. I stood there maybe a minute, watching, and nothing moved. I told myself people work night shifts and went back to bed. Morning came and I looked out again with coffee in my hand. The maroon SUV was back. The pickup was back. The sedan and the hatchback were gone. Every vehicle from the night before, in the same spot, like I'd dreamed the middle part. I walked the lot, touched a hood, warm. But everything was warm. It was already 80 by 8 a.m. I wrote down the plates. West Virginia, Kentucky, West Virginia, Ohio. All of them muddy on the lower panels. The maroon SUV had a child seat in the back and a Bible on the dash, splayed open, like somebody wanted you to see it was there. I ate breakfast at the same diner, different waitress. I asked her if the Ridgeview was busy this time of year. She said, off and on, and didn't look up from the register. The sheriff's office was in a squat brick building next to the courthouse. I hadn't called ahead. That was on purpose. I wanted to see the room before he'd had time to arrange his face. The dispatcher, a heavy woman in her 50s, asked what I was there about. I said I was a journalist doing a piece on the missing men, and I'd appreciate a few minutes of the sheriff's time. She picked up the phone, said a sentence I couldn't hear, and told me to have a seat. He came out about 10 minutes later. Big guy, maybe 60, gray mustache, department polo tucked in. He shook my hand and said, "Come on back." His office had a window, with the blinds half open, and a framed photo of him with what looked like a grandson holding up a bass. He sat down and folded his hands on the desk. "So what can I do for you?" I gave him my pitch. 3 men, 18 months, families reluctant to talk, any pattern, any active investigation. I kept it easy. I didn't push. He listened all the way through without interrupting. When I finished, he said, "Well, I appreciate you making the drive down here." Then he said, "But I've got to tell you honestly, there's not much of a story." He named one of the missing men, said the guy had a habit and had probably walked off to find a better supply. Happened all the time in the county. Named the second. Said the family had issues, left it there. Was quieter on the third. Said the investigation was open. I asked if I could see any of the case files, even a redacted summary. He smiled the smile of a man who's said no 1,000 times without ever using the word. "I'll tell you what," he said. "You leave me your number, and if anything crosses my desk that'd help you, I'll be in touch." I hadn't given him a card. I hadn't said my name at the front desk. The dispatcher had asked, and I'd told her I was a journalist. That was it. I know because I'd been careful about it. Bylines are easy to look up, but I write under initials for a reason, and I hadn't handed him anything. He wrote a number down on a legal pad, then stood up and walked me to the door, put a hand on my shoulder, and using my first name, he said, "You have a safe drive back, all right?" I nodded, kept my face flat. In the parking lot, I sat in my car for a second and made myself breathe normal. Could be nothing. He could have Googled me while I was in the waiting room. 10 minutes was long enough. Dispatcher could have written down my plate the second I pulled up. That's what I decided walking to the car. Then I drove back to the motel and there was a note on my door. Just a folded piece of paper wedged into the frame at eye level. No envelope. I opened it in the room with the door locked. Handwritten, blue pen, block letters. It said, "We hope the peace on the economy is going well." And under that, my first name again. The same way the sheriff had said it. No signature. I'd said, "the economy," to exactly one person. The woman at the front desk when I checked in. I want to be honest about what happened next. I did not investigate further. I did not knock on the office door. I did not call the state police. I packed my bag, put everything in the trunk, walked to the office and said I had a family emergency and needed to check out early. The woman at the desk, same woman, said, "Oh, hun, I'm sorry to hear that," refunded me 2 nights in cash, and did not ask a single follow-up question. She didn't ask what happened. She didn't ask if I was okay. She counted the bills twice and slid them across and wished me safe travels. I drove north for 6 hours without stopping, except for gas. And at the gas station, I stood on the far side of the pump and watched the road behind me. When I got home, I called Rachel and told her all of it. The cars, the sheriff, the note on the door. She was quiet for a long time. Then she said she'd rather not run it, that she'd cover my expenses out of a different budget line, and if I wanted to write it as a first-person thing for somewhere else, she'd understand. But she wasn't going to be the one to put it in print. I said okay. I didn't push. I don't think I wanted to write it either. About 14 months later, one of the 3 men turned up. Not the one with the habit. The quiet one. The one whose case the sheriff had said was open. He was in a truck stop parking lot outside Amarillo, waiting for a ride he didn't seem to know the name of. His mother flew out and brought him home. A reporter from a Charleston paper tried to interview him, and he said he didn't remember anything from that period and asked her to leave. That's the whole public record. He's alive. He doesn't talk about it. The other 2 have never been found. I've watched, over the years, to see if any national outlet ever cracked that county open. As far as I can tell, none has. Reporters from bigger papers have tried. They get the same polite nothing I got, or they don't get that far. A friend at a magazine told me last year they'd sent someone down and pulled them after 3 days because the person felt watched. That was the word she used. Watched. I don't know what was happening in that motel parking lot. I don't know if the cars were moving people through or moving something else, or if I was just spooked and misreading a shift change at a place with more traffic than I'd assumed. I don't know how the sheriff had my name. I have guesses. I've had years to make guesses. None of them are the kind of thing you print without a source. And I never got a source because I left. That's the part I come back to. Not the note, not the sheriff. The part where I left, and the woman at the desk gave me my money back without asking why, like she'd done it before. That's all for now, everyone. Drop your opinion in the comments, and if the episode gave you that uneasy feeling, a like would be appreciated. 4chan is strange, because you never really know whether a post is just a story, or someone trying to explain what happened to them. Either way, some of them linger. I'll see you in the next video.